So here we are for a 6th time, kiddies. That's right, Samsung wants to be back in your pants with its fresh dinky delight, the Galaxy Z Flip 6. But is it actually delightful? Well, the price isn't particularly congenial as it starts from just over £1,000 now, which is a wee bit more than rivals like Motorola's brilliant Razr. I've had my Sims stuffed inside of the Galaxy Z Flip 6 for just over a week now. I've taken it on a launch trip, I've taken it to a festival, managed to not lose it or bugger it up somehow. So here's my full Galaxy Z Flip 6 review, and for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Now this 6th generation flexible phone will look and feel rather familiar to fans of Samsung's flip blowers. It's like someone took a narrow iPhone and basically snapped it in half. Which frankly is the best thing you could really do to an iPhone. It's like a mercy killing. That flat-edged finish means that the Z Flip 6 isn't as comfortable to clutch as the Razr, because you've got sharp corners here that press into your palm flesh. Plus, digging your thumb into that fold to flip this bugger open is a wee bit awkward. There's absolutely sod all gap in between the two halves, which is good, of course, but having rounded edges would have made it a wee bit easier, at least, especially if you've got no thumbnails to actually dig into that crevice. But still, like other flippy flexible phones, the Galaxy Z Flip 6 is wonderfully compact, so it's easy enough to slip into a pocket, bag, or some other kind of receptacle. Colour options include blue, yellow, silver, shadow, and mint, plus Samsung.com exclusives beginning with white and peach. So lots of options and plenty of brighter hues as well, which is always welcome, especially here in Blighty where summer tends to last about a week, maybe a week and a half if we're lucky. You know, a couple of days before winter sets in, and then we'll need all the bright bloody colours we can muster. Well, I got to say, I really like this pastel-y blue effort. It's subtle, it's not in your face, but it's still reasonably bright and charming, really. The hinge and the frame are built from Samsung's enhanced armour aluminium, and so far, all perfectly scratch-free. This thing is basically box fresh. I don't think I dropped it at the festival, although not the most reliable of memories on that particular day. As for the cover screen and the arse end of the Z Flip 6, well, they're made from Gorilla Glass Victus 2, which is considerably more scratch resistant than Gorilla Glass Victus 1, although I do have one tiny wee nick here on the back end. It's about the size of an eyelash. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get this thing on camera, probably not. Sort of there-ish. Don't know if that's helping at all. Yeah, whatever. So you probably get away without slapping a case on it, to be honest, unless you want it looking completely pristine at all times. And I'm really glad that Samsung stuck with a matte finish around the back end, because I like a fried snack, and greasy fingers plus glossy phone arse is a bad combination. And impressively, the Galaxy Z Flip 6 is IP48 water and dust resistant, so can be fully submerged in water, no worries. And as far as I'm aware, and to be honest that's not very far, so you might want to Google this, I think the Galaxy Z Flip 6 is the only flippy type phone with any kind of dust and small particle resistance. Now that 3.4-inch Super AMOLED cover screen might not be quite as spacious as the Razr's, but nor is it partially obscured by those camera lenses. And it's certainly big enough to comfortably use the wide variety of widgets on here, which can now be crammed in there 2 or 3 to a screen. Navigation is pretty swift and simple, although sometimes a little overly sensitive. You can skip a couple of widgets just by being a little bit too eager. And as before, you can pinch to zoom to quickly flick between your different widgets. I prefer keeping them pretty simple and straightforward, as you can see there. And it's all reasonably smooth as well, despite the fact you've got a 60 Hz refresh cap here, which frankly is pretty cheap considering the price of this thing. And I've got to say though, I did not enjoy using this cover screen as much as I did on the Motorola Razr 50 Ultra, and not just because of the cruddy refresh. And for one, actually getting apps to run on this thing is a massive pain in the testicular region. It's got to download sodding GoodLock and then mess around with all that. Whereas on the Razr, it just works out of the box. And even once I'd buggered around and got everything working and stuff, I still had problems. So sometimes I'd tap an app and it would just be completely unresponsive. It would be the equivalent of me on a Sunday morning with a ridiculous hangover. Usually documents would refuse to load up on it as well, which was particularly helpful when I was, traveling, trying to get my boarding pass up on this thing, trying to get press tickets, all that kind of stuff. Still, the widgets at least behave themselves, and you can quickly reply to messages on that cover screen using a fairly decent sized keyboard, which does, to be fair, pretty much fill up that entire window. I do enjoy the chat assistance tool as well. This is supposed to offer up a bunch of smart AI generated replies that sound like you when you can't be asked to actually type out a message or anything. except a full week on, it still reckons I'm far more polite and sober than I actually am in real life. It forgets to misspell every other word and just chuck in random F-bombs for no reason. And it still hasn't figured out that I do reply to a lot of messages with completely irrelevant anime memes as well. Basically, it just needs to be more of a dick. And that cover screen also supports interpreter conversation mode, so you can have it translate whatever you're saying into a variety of supported languages, which is expanding all of the time. And it can be a bit shonky still, has to be said. Occasionally it just up completely.
Shook still like selfication in the Judas up here.
What? And as always, there's a small variety of different cover screen designs that you can chuck on here, most of them fully customizable. You can chuck your own pictures on, obviously. A couple of animated efforts, which are quite fun to piddle about with when you're bored. And there's also an always on display that can be scheduled for waking hours. And that display is a full HD panel, so certainly crisp enough for all of that widgety goodness, browsing your photo collection, even enjoying some YouTube if you can't be asked to open this bugger right up. Or you just want to prop up the Galaxy Z Flip 6 for a bit of hands-free viewing. Of course, if you want to watch a show or a movie or something like that, you will want to extend this thing to its full 6.7 inches for maximum satisfaction. That internal dynamic AMOLED 2X display is again pretty crisp with its 2640 by 1080 pixel resolution, and it's a near perfect shape for enjoying a flick or a bit of multitasking. That crease is mostly masked when you're using the Z Flip 6, and that screen is bright enough to help counter any reflections, even a nasty bit of sun glare. And it's an LTPO panel as well, as you would expect at this sort of price point, ranging from 1Hz all the way up to 120Hz. As for the stereo speaker setup, well, that's pleasingly loud enough to be comfortably heard even in a busy kitchen with extractor fans going off, kids doing their bloody Taylor Swift extravaganzas in the background, all kinds of annoying bollockry like that. And it's pretty decent quality audio as well, not too tinny. On the software side, well, of course, it's One UI as usual with Samsung smartphones, which is still quite on the heavy side, has to be said. And personally, I prefer the stock Android vibes of the Motorola Razr, especially as Samsung has slapped a ton of its own products and services on here, when the regular Android stuff, fares pretty well. And of course, a good bit of Bigsby action. But on the flip side, Samsung has crammed a fair bit of actually pretty decent AI tools and features onto the Galaxy Z Flip 6, which are now all conveniently tucked away in a single settings menu, Galaxy AI. It's got good old chat assist and that interpreter on there. You've also got plenty of other bits that can summarize, transcribe, and the photo-based shenanigans, which I will bang on about in a bit. Yippee hooray. And it's got to be said, Circle to Search is still an absolute banger as well, which I don't think anyone on the planet hates. It's just so quick and easy and convenient for doing a search on anything that you come across in your various apps, online, whatever. As for the performance, well, that's covered by Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 backed by 12 gigs of RAM, so the Galaxy Z Flip 6 absolutely flies along like the Roadrunner with a firework jammed right up his feathery arse. Gaming is surprisingly smooth, and even quite long sessions work well, as Samsung has somehow managed to stuff a vapor chamber into that bendy frame, so I was more than happy enough buggering about in games like Genshin for a good couple of hours, acting like I actually knew what my little spiky head cockwomble was supposed to be doing, and absolutely not just wandering aimlessly looking for things to smash in the face to make myself feel better. The only time I noticed the Z Flip 6 getting a wee bit toasty on my travels and everything was when I was doing some mobile hotspotting with it for about half an hour or so. Then it did get rather warm to the touch, but apart from that, it's been absolutely fine. But then there's the battery life. Yeah, so you've got a slightly bigger 4000 mAh battery stuffed inside of the Galaxy Z Flip 6. It's not exactly weenie, but the battery life is absolutely the Achilles heel of this bugger. And if you're what could be accurately described as a more demanding user, you just can't quit that TikTok, for instance, well, you ain't gonna get on with this weenie devil. This past week, I've been getting at most around 5 hours of screen on time with mixed use. That's a good bit of messaging, occasional web browsing, using the maps, lots of audio streaming in the background as well when the phone has been hibernating, and a little bit of camera action here and there as well. But the days where I did use the camera quite a lot, it was actually closer to 4 to 4.5 hours of screen on time. Certainly not as good as what I found with the Motorola Razr, that's for sure, which is similar sort of dimensions. So most days I either ended with dregs or I simply had to plug it in for a bit in order to power it back up so I could actually make it through the evening. And you can't just bung a cable in there for 10-20 minutes and expect good returns either, because it's slow ass 25 watt wired charging. And you do have wireless charging, but this is also slower than a one-legged tortoise with a brick strapped to its head. But yeah, if you literally just want something dinky to slip in your pocket and occasionally check emails on, then it'll probably do you fine. Now the camera setup is pretty simple here as usual, but you do get an upgraded primary shooter. That's now a 50 megapixel snapper backed by a 12 megapixel ultra wide angle shooter. I left Samsung's scene optimizer tool knocked off to keep the image capture as natural as possible, and in this default state the Z Flip 6 did a respectable job in most conditions. You will see some flaring when shooting indoor HDR scenes, and noise levels are as expected when the lighting isn't ideal, while any sudden motion will muff up your shot. But as usual, this phone gives people a healthy glow and even makes me look reasonably human-like. Bright blue skies are usually well captured too if you're lucky enough to actually find one. There's only a slight bit of saturation usually and strong light. You can digitally zoom up to 10 times in total while snapping away, or else the Z Flip 6 can also shoot high-res 50 meg photos if you want to crop in later. I prefer having a dedicated telephoto lens for portrait shots and other such occasions, like what Motorola served up on its Razr 50 Ultra. But Samsung only offers an ultra-wide alternative, which is fine if you need to cram more stuff into the frame. And of course this thing is stuffed so full of AI-type shindiggery that it's practically spraying out of every orifice. So for instance, you've got the Portrait Studio Smarts, which can transform you into a comic book character, albeit slightly taking the piss by actually adding proper hair onto me. Here's me if I was a member of a early 2000s folk band. Can also transform you into a watercolour, or a slightly constipated looking Disney character. And then there's one of my personal favourites, Sketch to Image, which allows you to basically draw anything you like in any existing photo, and then it gets digitally added. Never not hilarious. And if you're a wee bit worried about any of this, you do get a tiny wee watermark stuck there in the bottom left corner which says AI generated content. You ain't fooling anyone. And you can't just basically draw massive cock and balls on someone's forehead and have it added in there. It does not do that kind of stuff. Believe me, I've tried. And then of course you've got all the regular AI photo editing tools chucked on here as well, so you can resize things, obliterate them from existence, all that good stuff. And then squirreled away inside the Galaxy Z Flip 6 in that massive internal display is a final 10 megapixel lens, which can be used for your Skypey, zoomy type shenanigans. But there's certainly no point in using this for selfies, because that cover screen is more than spacious enough to comfortably use as a viewfinder. You've got lots of different ways you can activate that shutter, including flashing your palm, using the volume keys, using your voice, all kinds of stuff. And you could also effortlessly shoot vlog-style videos using those external cameras in good old vertical mode if you do a bit of the TikToks, or not if you don't. The recording maxes out at 4K resolution at 60 frames per second, and even at Ultra HD, Samsung's stabilization is absolutely banging. This footage here was shot in a sweaty tent with lots of elbows jabbing me, and after a few too many shandies possibly. And even my shaky-handed shooting abilities produce some pretty smooth-looking footage. Picture quality is fine, audio is cleanly recorded, even in quite tricky situations like this previously mentioned sweatbox, with quite a lot of screaming and riffing going on. And Samsung has apparently imbued the Z Flip with some sort of special night video smarts with Super HDR for high-contrast, low-light footage. And this phone certainly did a respectable job when it came to night recording, with only the occasional focus fail to really complain about. And there you have it, my lovelies. That is what I reckon of Samsung's Galaxy Z Flip 6 after using it as my full-time smartphone for just over a week now. And I've got to say, my favourite flippy type phone is still the Motorola Razr 50 Ultra, or the Razr Plus, whatever the hell they call it in the States, just to complicate matters. The cover screen is just so much more satisfying to use on Motorola's wee blower, and of course you've got the better battery life as well. It's the battery life that really kills it for me on this thing. Anyhow, that's what this bald northern twonk reckons. But what do you think of the Galaxy Z Flip 6? Have you put your pre-order in, or maybe not? Definitely let us know why down in the comments below. Please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech, and have yourselves a ruddy, wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone, love you.